It is indeed a great honor and a privilege to address this distinguished gathering on an issue that will define the economic future of our continent. It's how do we build African business champions capable of competing globally while transforming our economies. Africa can no longer afford to remain the greatest promise. Time has come for Africa to become one of the world's greatest producers of institutions, industrial champions, innovation, and economic power. Permit me, Your Excellency, to address you today, or this gathering today, not merely from a standpoint of theory, but from the practical realities of building businesses across different markets, economies, and business cycles over the past 3 decades. During this period, I have experienced growth, uncertainty, disruption, resistance, transformation at first hand. And it is from that lived experience that I speak today about the urgent need for Africa to intentionally raise globally competitive champions. There comes a defining moment in the journey of every nation and every continent when it must confront a fundamental question. Are we content with merely participating in the global economy, or we are prepared to build the African or Ghanaian institutions, enterprises, and business champions capable of competing globally while transforming our economies locally? Your Excellency, I believe Ghana and indeed Africa has arrived at that moment. For decades, Africa has been described as a continent of potential, a continent of rich natural resources, youthful energy, entrepreneurial spirit, creativity, and untapped opportunity. Yet despite all these promises, the defining question of our time is no longer whether Africa has potential. The real question is whether we are building the kind of leadership, culture, transgenerational businesses, industrial capacity, governance systems capable of transforming that potential into global competitiveness and long-term economic influence. The truth is, natural resources and population size does not transform nations. Potential alone has never transformed any nation. Institutions do. What Africa and Ghana must now produce, Your Excellency, is intentionally and at scale are enduring institutions. Because throughout history, every major economic transformation has been driven by strong indigenous enterprises. Your Excellency, Asia built industrial giants. Europe built manufacturing powerhouses. America built global corporations that became engines of innovation, influence, and national competitiveness. Africa must now build its own champions. Not merely CEOs. A CEO manages an enterprise or a company, but a business champion transforms an economy. The distinction is important. The evolution of transformational leadership in Africa is often started by being an entrepreneur, then a CEO, then an institutional builder. Then you become a business champion. The final stage of business champion is where private enterprise becomes a force for continental transformation, driving innovation, scaling across borders, retaining African value within Africa, and contributing meaningfully to national development. Your Excellency, allow me to briefly share my experience, or that of KGL Group. Like many Africans of my generation, I built much of my professional and entrepreneurial career and wealth abroad, spending nearly 3 decades operating at the top level of corporate UK. But at some point, conviction became stronger than comfort. I returned to Ghana, not because I didn't like the comfort of the United Kingdom. I returned to Ghana because I believe that African-owned enterprises could build world-class institutions powered by technology, governance, disciplined execution, and long-term strategic vision. Where others saw adversity in a difficult operating environment in Ghana and in Africa, we saw opportunity. We built with long-term vision. We invested in systems, we prioritized governance, and we embraced technology not merely as a tool, but as a strategic enabler of scale. There were moments when the easier option would have been to retreat and go back to the United Kingdom. But difficult environments do not build weak institutions, they reveal strong ones. What began as a Ghanaian enterprise with bold vision has steadily evolved into something much bigger, a truly African story of ambition, resilience, innovation, and continental transformation. Today, our footprint extends beyond Ghana into more than 10 African markets, including Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria, Liberia, and with the help of Your Excellency, we are in discussion with the Kenyan government to enter that market, and we are grateful to you, Your Excellency. And in all these markets, where we have used technology-driven solutions, and these are helping modernize sectors of their economies and strengthening operational efficiency. And this is important because African champions are not built merely to operate across borders. They are built by solving African problems with African innovation. But perhaps even more importantly, we understood early that true continental transformation cannot happen if successful African enterprises only extract value. They must reinvest value into their ecosystem. That is why at KGL Group of Companies, through our investment subsidiary, KGL Capital, has deliberately invested millions of dollars into startups, emerging enterprises, and struggling businesses, not only in Ghana and across Africa, but even in the developed markets. Our journey reinforced a critical lesson. Building an African champion requires more than capital. It requires resilience, institutional discipline, and innovation. It requires governance credibility. It also requires technological adaptation. And above all, it requires long-term strategic thinking. Like many indigenous Ghanaian and African enterprises, we're confronted with the same thing: constrained to access of patient capital, regulatory complexities, infrastructural limitations, and so on. Yet despite these challenges, our experience demonstrates that African enterprises can compete successfully when bold vision matched with disciplined execution and supported by enabling public policy. That doesn't mean there are no challenges, Your Excellency. Building an African champion, you would have a lot of challenges. Distinguished guests, permit me to speak candidly at this point about some of the challenges many business leaders face. As an indigenous company begins to scale, scrutiny naturally intensifies, and rightly so, it should. But in some instances, scrutiny evolves into suspicion. Scale begins to be viewed not as a national asset to be strengthened, but as something to be contained. Business leaders are not asking for immunity, Your Excellency. Indigenous companies must comply with the law, yes, they must do. They must pay taxes, yes, they must do. As KGL, I think the Commissioner General will bear with me. I promised Your Excellency at Kwewu that we were going to pay 150 million cedis in taxes for one of our companies. Your Excellency, we turned up, we paid 153 million. We will continue to support the system, and we will be announcing another significant tax payment for the second company within the next within the next month. And Your Excellency will go through all the serving companies of the subsidiary, and we will make huge tax payments. So yes, businesses should pay taxes. Should they meet regulatory standards? Yes, they must meet regulatory standards. Should they be investigated? Yes, they must be investigated when there is cause. Accountability for us is not optional. It is foundational. But accountability must also be consistent. It must be predictable, proportionate, and institutionally mature. We must apply the same standards, the same patience, and the same regulatory balance to indigenous enterprises as we do with the foreign multinationals. In many African economies, when a foreign enterprise faces operational difficulty, the instinct is to stabilize it because policymakers recognize that its collapse could negatively impact jobs, investment, and the broader economy. Yet when indigenous companies face challenges, the narrative can sometimes become adversarial before the process concludes. Regulatory enforcement must never evolve into institutional hostility towards indigenous scale. If Ghana does not protect and nurture responsible indigenous enterprises, who will build the continental champions that we aspire to create? No nation has industrialized by undermining its own productive capacity. The economies we admire today regulate strongly, but they also protect strategic industries. They hold companies accountable, but they do not dismantle domestic champions lightly. They understand that scale is a national asset. In Ghana, we must develop that same institutional maturity. If an indigenous enterprise fails governance standards, we should correct it. If it breaches the law, we should hold it accountable. But if it is building responsibly, creating jobs, paying taxes, innovating, and contributing to national growth, then we must protect its ability to scale. Because raising African champions requires more than an individual ambition. It requires institutional maturity, it requires policy coherence, and it requires our collective understanding that sustainable scale benefits the nation, not merely the founder. Distinguished guests, Africa's greatest deficit is not lack of ideas. Africa and Ghana does not suffer from poverty of ambition. Too often, Africa suffers from inconsistency of execution. Infrastructure alone does not transform nations. Leadership does. Africa requires a new generation of leaders, business, and government. Think beyond election cycles, beyond quarterly profits, and beyond narrow national interests. We need leaders prepared to build institutions. No transformation agenda can succeed where leaders fail. Then brings me to my next topic, which is quite important to myself. And I think it should be to most of the founders in this room. Another of Africa's most under-discussed economic challenge is the inability to institutionalize wealth across generations. Then I'm talking about family wealth and transgenerational enterprise. Too much African wealth disappears within one generation because it is consumed rather than structured, fragmented rather than institutionalized, which means when we make the money, we buy the cars and the buildings and all those slots, and it disappears when Alex Dadey passes on. It all disappears. And that is what African wealth is. No civilization advances sustainably when wealth disappears every generation. Yet globally, many of the world's most enduring corporations were built through disciplined family capital, succession planning, governance structures, and long-term reinvestment strategies. If Ghana is serious about building sustainable business champions, then family wealth must be viewed not merely as an inheritance, which the family comes in and takes over, but it should be viewed as an asset class for building transgenerational enterprises. So you just don't make money, think that it goes to be inherited. Founders of us in this room, those who have made a bit of wealth, should look at wealth as an asset class to be reinvested in our communities. But this requires intentional investment in family offices, investment in holding structures, governance systems, succession frameworks, and long-term capital redeployment into productive sectors of the economy. The future African business champion must not simply create wealth. He or she must transfer institutional memory, capability, values, productive capitals across generations. In conclusion, Your Excellency, let me leave us with one final thought. The mission before us is greater than any individual person or corporate success. Greater task is nation building through enterprise and raising and to build great African champions. Champions to create prosperity, champions to empower young people, champions to strengthen institutions, drive innovation, scale across borders, build industrial capacity, and shape Africa's economic future. And this is the Africa that we intend to build. Thank you very much. May God bless our homeland Ghana and make our nation great and strong.